So Clemson was defeated by NC State 21-27 in overtime. And everybody is wondering what's wrong with Clemson. Is Clemson officially done? I had my guy Juice Alert, who I was going back and forth with on Twitter. He was saying that Clemson's chances of being a dynasty are over. They're probably going to have more seasons like this. And this is all I have to say. I don't think Clemson is done. I just think that, this is a season where Clemson isn't going to be in the national championship picture. Same thing with Ohio State. And listen, this is what I tell everybody. You can only reload so much until you just have to go ahead and get an entirely different clip. Okay? Everybody, when it comes to Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, they know they lose talent to the NFL every single year, and they always say we don't rebuild, we reload. But every time you reload, you don't really fully, completely empty the entire clip. You're just going to the side, putting in 2-3 extra bullets. But eventually there comes a time where you don't have any more bullets left over. You just have to go ahead and buy some more ammo and get an entirely different clip. Sometimes you're not going to be in the college football national championship picture every single year. Like Alabama is a dynasty. We get that. But they haven't been in the championship picture every single year. There's been some years when Alabama has 2 losses and they're not in the college football playoffs. Now, that doesn't happen often, but it has happened. Sometimes, you have to reload, but sometimes when you're reloading, it's not good enough to get you into the championship conversation. And when you look at Clemson, this was a team that had some issues. I wasn't really all that high on the offensive line going in. And that wide receiver outside of Justin Ross, you don't really have a lot of proven production there. I mean, Justin Ross has played pretty good up to this point. I mean, he was their best wide receiver against NC State. He had 8 receptions for 77 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. But outside of him, you kind of lack the talent needed right now at wide receiver. Not saying that they don't have the talent. You do have the 5 and 4 star guys. But all I'm saying is that talent right now isn't really developed like how it should be. You don't have the talent at wide receiver this year that you have had in the past. So when you look at DJ Uyunglele, he was 12 of 26, 111 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. He also had a couple of rushing yards with 63 on the ground. But overall, I kind of think that Clemson doesn't have as great as a team around him this year like how they had last year when he had to step in and replace Trevor Lawrence when he was going through the COVID-19 issues and stuff. So when I look at DJ Uyunglele, I do think he's a talented QB, okay? Everybody keeps saying Clemson was going to drop off eventually. You had Deshaun Watson, then you had Trevor Lawrence. Were you going to be able to continue that trend with DJ Uyunglele? I don't really think DJ Uyunglele is the problem. I really think the team around him just really isn't all that great. And you got to remember, I don't really think that Clemson was really as good as a team as a lot of people thought they were. Because every time Clemson was forced to play an opponent outside of the ACC, they've kind of struggled. You look at what happened earlier a couple of weeks ago when they faced Georgia, they struggled. You look what happened last year, they struggled against Ohio State. Justin Fields torched them in the semifinals. So Clemson hasn't really been all that competitive when they've been matched up against really great opponents. So, I'm not really surprised that Clemson's having the struggles that they're having this season. And you look at NC State, a lot of people were really high on NC State coming into this year. And some people out there felt like NC State could challenge Clemson because this defense that NC State has, they get active. And even Dabo Swinney said it after the game. He said that NC State's defense kind of looked like ours. And then you look at how good their quarterback played. Their quarterback, Devin Leary, was on fire. 32 of 44 for 238 pass yards and 4 touchdowns against a Brent Venables coach defense. He lit Clemson's defense on fire. So when I look at Clemson right now, man, like I just look at a football team that's still really good. It's just the fact that they're not as good as what a lot of people thought they were. And they're pretty much going against themselves. You know, they're going against their trials and tribulations trying to find themselves. You don't really have the run game going. You only had 101 rushing yards total as a team. And if you take away the 63 rushing yards that DJ Uyunglele had, you're not really getting a lot of production from your running back. Like, I really feel like Clemson is trying to find their identity. They don't really know who they are. Last year, the year before that, we knew what this team was. We knew they had Trevor Lawrence. You had guys on the outside. You had Travis Etienne, who was your big playmaker. But you don't really have any of that this year. You're trying to get new faces incorporated into your offense. You're trying to find out what everybody's roles on the team are. And unfortunately for Clemson, you know, normally you don't really have that tough of a schedule. Normally you may get tested twice a year and probably later on in the season. But for Clemson, they're getting tested early. And the downfall of Clemson compared to the previous seasons, compared to this year's, the fact that, you know, they were able to find a way to escape anytime they got tested. That's what good teams do. They're able to find a way to win games some way, somehow. And for Clemson, they haven't really been able to do that. You know, they get in these tightly contested contests, and it really feels like they're escaping. They nearly lost to Georgia Tech not too long ago. And we saw what Georgia Tech did this weekend. They put off a big upset against UNC. So when I look at Clemson, I still feel like this is a really good team. I still feel like this team is going to win 10 games. Maybe they'll win 9. But I still feel like this is a really good team. They're just not, you know, one of the best teams. Same thing with Ohio State. And I keep telling people, you know, like, you can only reload so much until you eventually have to empty the clip completely and you have to restart. Okay, and when I look at Clemson, that's what this program is doing right now. They're kind of hitting the reset button. They're refreshing. You have a lot of new faces. You lost a lot of guys to the NFL and a lot of good players who have walked out this program over the last couple of years. So there's going to come a time when eventually you're just kind of going to have to refresh. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that Clemson is rebuilding. I'm just saying that, you know, this just isn't a season that you just retool and you find yourself right back in the championship picture. So for Clemson fans out there, you still have a really good team. But, you know, it's kind of hard to see just how good this team is going to be, simply for the fact that you expect to be in the championship conversation every single year. Like, Clemson has been ranked in the top 5, top 10 of the AP poll for like damn near 3 years. And now they're barely inside of the top 25. And I know it's really strange, but things like this happen. You are going to have seasons where you're just not going to be there. Okay? So, I mean, for Clemson fans, it pretty much seems like they've given up on the season, which I understand. Clemson fans, no matter how well the season goes from this point forward, no matter if they win 10 games, win the ACC championship, and win a New Year's Six bowl game or make it to a New Year's Six bowl game, this season kind of is an L, because at this point, if you're a Clemson fan, you expect to win championships. You expect to be competing for championships. You expect to be in the college football playoffs. And when you're not in the college football playoffs, the season kind of is looked at as a disappointment. Same thing for Alabama fans. You know, when they're not in the college football playoffs or they're not competing for a national championship, the season kind of is viewed as a disappointment. That's what happens when you have the expectations set so high, when the expectations kind of become the standard. You know, for Clemson, the standard every single year is to compete for a championship. And when Clemson's not doing that, Clemson fans kind of, you know, aren't engaged. They're not happy because that's what you expect. But you're not going to be able to compete for a championship every single year. You're going to have some years when you have 2 losses and you're not able to get in. That's what happens. You know, like in college football, everybody talks about how dominant Alabama has been, but everybody seems to forget that there's been some years when Alabama has lost 2 games and they weren't able to get in. Get what I'm saying? Alabama has had some down years. Now, the difference between a down year for Alabama, Ohio State, and the Clemson is that a down year for them is winning 10 games and only having 2 losses and making it to a New Year's Six bowl game or something like that. A down year for the majority of other programs is probably, 8 wins. You get what I'm saying? So for Clemson fans, you kind of view this as a down year, but I just really feel like this is a year that Clemson really is taking to just completely refresh and reload. I don't think Clemson is done. I think it's just way too early. Like, this is a season of college football that has a lot of resemblance to 2007, when we just saw upsets happening every single week. I think that's what this 2021 college football season is. We're just seeing a lot of upsets taking place. We're going to see a lot of teams at the end of this year that we're going to be like, damn, I didn't expect them to be this good. So when you look at Clemson, man, like, I just think it's just one of those years where you're probably going to end up winning 10 games. You're going to make it to a New Year's Six bowl game, and you're going to end up figuring out who you are later in the season. But right now for Clemson, normally early in the year, they kind of don't really play the best of competition, and they can afford to struggle because eventually talent is going to be able to overcome that. But this year's Clemson's team, they don't really have that talent. They don't really have the talent to be able to continue to escape and get by week after week. Eventually, it's going to catch up to them. And that's what happened this past weekend against NC State. They couldn't escape. They weren't as talented enough as a team to be able to narrowly escape. And eventually, there was going to come a time where Clemson was going to end up slipping up. I thought it was going to happen against Georgia Tech. They were able to escape in that game. But it ended up happening against NC State. Clemson kept getting by, and eventually it caught him in the leg. And for Clemson, they're not one of the best teams, because the best teams in college football, when they get in these close games, they find a way to will themselves into a victory. You look at what happened with Alabama the previous week when they played Florida. That game was extremely close. Alabama, some way, somehow, was still able to will themselves into a victory. These great teams always find a way, somehow, some way, to bail themselves out and find a way to pick up a victory in a tough game. Clemson wasn't able to do that because they're not that talented. So when you look at Clemson, what's wrong with Clemson is simply for the fact that, this is a team that lacks identity on offense. They don't really know who they are. They're still trying to figure out the roles of the players and how to best utilize the talent that they have on offense. So for Clemson, I don't think they're done. I just think that, they're just going through one of those years. Alabama has been through one of these years. Ohio State has been through a couple of these years. Like, sometimes you just go through one of those years, like, you're just not there when it comes to competing for a national championship, but you're still a pretty damn good program. You're still a pretty damn good football team. So when I look at Clemson, I still think that this is a pretty damn good football team. This is just a team that just isn't going to be there when it comes to a national championship discussion. And that's why a lot of people are going to view this as a down year for Clemson, because people expect Clemson to compete for a championship year in and year out. But, sometimes when you go on the run, you're going to end up, eventually, the car's going to stop working. You can't drive the same car forever. When you look at Clemson and you look at Alabama and you look at Ohio State, everybody talks about how dominant these programs have been. But eventually, every program has a season where they kind of, they kind of drop a little bit. And that's what I think Clemson's going through right now. And for Clemson fans, you're probably upset because you expect this team to be competing for championships every single year. But in all reality, you're going to have some years where you have 2 losses. You win 10 games, you win the ACC Conference Championship, but you just don't get in, simply for the fact that, the team just wasn't really all that great. There's some years like that. Alabama had a couple of years like this. You get what I'm saying? Ohio State is currently having one of those years. Everybody talks about, how the college football playoffs needs to be expanded because, we are tired of seeing the same teams in Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. But people fail to realize that, you have to be able to capitalize when a program like Clemson, Ohio State is having a down year. I'm just saying. I think Clemson still is a really good program. I think this program still is going to be in a national championship conversation for years to come. They're just having one of those years where they're retooling, but even though they're retooling, they don't have enough talent this year.